Welcome to Bite Size Buyers, the podcast that brings you the latest in technology news from the unique perspective of global technology procurement experts. We're your hosts. I'm Sam Harris.
And I'm Nick Wagstaff.
So join us as we delve into the most pressing topics in the world of technology, offering insights and analysis that you won't find anywhere else. This week, we've got the Marks & Spencer cyber attack, the cost of manners with generative AI, and the updated Q4 results from the IT services giants. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so up first today, we have the news over the course of this week of the M&S cybersecurity incident. Still pretty unclear as to what's happened exactly. There's been quite light on details in terms of any specifics around the attack itself. There has been a formal notification. The CEO, Stuart Machin, has said there's no need to take any action. And if the situation changes, that they'll, of course, let customers know. What we do know so far is that things such as chip and PIN payments or contactless payments have been impacted. There's a delay in authorizing chip and PIN payments. There's been big issues, particularly with the click and collect service, where there's been reports of orders being in store, but M&S staff unable to actually release the items to the customers despite them having confirmation of the order in front of them, which would suggest it's a deeper system issue.
Yeah.
I think interestingly on this one, it would suggest that there's still an ongoing element to the attack. If it was in and out with data, for example, for a ransomware attack, then there wouldn't be seen to be this many ongoing issues, I would suggest, in terms of the ongoing degradation of customer service.
Yeah.
But look, this isn't isolated to M&S, is it? This is something we're seeing more and more of. We've seen a number of situations over the past 6 to 9 months, and it's only increasing. There's a strong argument that says that AI is a leading cause now. We've got some potentially rather amateur hackers who are made to look far better than they once were with their use of certain AI tools. It's becoming more and more part of everyday life, isn't it?
Well, I think it's that thing, and without becoming too blasé about it, we're becoming a little bit desensitized to, what does it mean from a customer perspective? So, like, in M&S's case, are their customers then sort of voting with their feet if they can't transact, if they can't do it? Yeah, physically, they'll just go, right, I'll put this back and I'll go somewhere else, and they're probably getting a bit hacked off to avoid the pun, but it happens it's happening all the time now. It just becomes, it's almost that thing of, you haven't been sort of had a cyber attack, then there's something wrong with you. So it's, what does it mean from a customer's perspective? And I think it's that thing of, is it a long-term customer impact, or is it just a nuisance where somebody goes, well, you know what, I can't buy my food this week, my transaction's not working, I'll go to Waitrose, but I'll go back to M&S next week.
See, it's an interesting one with M&S in particular, isn't it? Because I think the demographic of customer at Marks and Spencer's is slightly different to a number of other organisations. If we think of H&M or New Look, I'm probably showing my age now, aren't I? But some of the shops that have a naturally younger demographic of
I shop in New Look all the time.
Their share price has just plummeted. That's next week's podcast covered. But if you think about the demographic of shoppers at someone like M&S and who will be impacted by this, and who will no doubt see the story and receive the email from the CEO, there is a potential that causes more alarm in certain age ranges of shoppers, in people who maybe are more protective of personal data.
Yeah.
Whereas I think there's more of I would say, blasé attitude amongst certain generations of, it's just a bit of data. It's all right.
Yeah.
So there may be more of an impact felt by certain areas of M&S potentially. But having said that, they've dealt with it relatively well. They've come out quickly. They've announced it. They've confirmed it. They've not gone into the details of it. Yeah. If it's an ongoing attack, then you wouldn't expect them to. they've been very upfront with the customers straight away, and they've tried to minimise the impact, and the shop's still running. So, look, I don't think this is a major story in terms of there's no major ongoing, or at the moment at least, no known lasting damage for M&S.
I can
It's
imagine there'll be some cyber software companies sort of getting a bit excited and be pitching their salespeople up at M&S head office, and sort of going, look, oh, if you'd have had our product, this would never have happened. It's always going
well,
to, and I would imagine there's some salespeople at their existing supply base who are probably getting a bit concerned. Because that tends to be the sort of the impact of these things, doesn't it? Businesses will go, right, we can't afford for that to happen again. They'll chuck a load of money at it from a cyber resilience perspective. Sometimes it's a bit of a scattergun approach. Not saying that's what they'll do, but sometimes it is, which is a bit of a catch-all. I think what we would always recommend is that companies look at this from a strategic perspective, identify what went wrong, what do they need to sort of put in place to fix it, but try not to panic, and just go crazy and just chuck a load of money at the CISO, as much as the CISO would love that, and go, right, okay, here's just buy everything so it doesn't happen again.
but,
Um,
then there's also a question here, though, on the opposite side of that, isn't there? Of the reason that people throw money at it at times is because they accept there's been chronic underfunding of cybersecurity
that
over
is
the
true.
years.
Yep. Yep.
And look, one of the things we discussed last week on the podcast with Ray was, looking at when people have thrown money at it and they've not gone in with the right strategic approach, and they get that kind of mismatch of
Yeah.
various different tools and products that don't quite mesh together properly, and it's a very expensive posture to maintain, and one that doesn't actually protect you very well. It's
Yep.
got gaping holes everywhere, and again, that's not to say that the Marks and Spencers have done that here. But look, there has to be a question mark about resilience. You have to say, if the impact has been felt, and the reports are from at least from Saturday
Yeah.
onwards,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's a number of days now. The fact that it's gone on for that long and the customer impact has been felt for that long would suggest that there is a question mark here around resilience, and one that, to your point, I'm sure there'll be a queue of willing suitors ready to come and solve life's
There'll be
problems
wringing
for
of
them.
hands. Some people wringing their hands in anticipation. Some
And there'll be
wringing their hands in
some people
desperation.
ringing necks, I think.
Okay. Next sort of story I wanted to cover. Bit of an interesting one. This almost like courtesy costs nothing, and it was an article which has sort of done the rounds across numerous organisations from ChatGPT, and the CEO sort of saying that it is costing them millions through their AI tooling for people saying please and thank you. And there's been some quite interesting sort of spins on this. I think they've seen the sort of the humorous side of it. But really it's around the sort of the power consumption needed for that additional information or that additional sort of request, and taking the time. So I think there's a couple of things to this. One is the way I've sort of looked at it is that ongoing sort of discussion and situation around power consumption and the
Yeah,
and the way that data centers are eating power and will continue to eat power, and the way that AI is driving that. So I think it's quite a serious piece around that. And I think what they're trying to, or the thing that I took away from this is that we've all got an obligation as part of this in terms of the way that we operate and the way that we do things. Whether it's the amount of photographs you store on your Google Cloud or whatever it might be, it all goes somewhere, and it all sort of requires some sort of consumption. And I think there was a report out a couple of weeks ago that says they expect that power consumption is going to double by 2030 for data centers. So it's massive. It's all part of the sustainability piece. I know we've spoken about this before. So even though it's quite a funny little angle, and I think um, there was a sort of tweet, Kate, saying, let's, just to be on the safe side, why not say please and thank you, when we get the robot uprising and that type of thing. Um, so I get that, and quite a sort of careful position, but it's that really that what I wanted to sort of talk about was that the impact of what we do and what we're working on, which we we tend to be, we can be quite sort of disposable in our thinking and our culture. And then I suppose the question I probably had for you, Sam, was what do we think from a procurement perspective we can sort of put into this in terms of how do we how do you help contract for it? The ways that you can minimize those sort of unnecessary requirements that's actually going to reduce your cost down.
Yeah, look, it's an interest. Well, there's a wider question there, right, around unnecessary requirements. Definitely,
Yeah.
I think the just to focus in quickly on the AI piece and the Gen AI piece here in general. I'm still not 100% convinced that Sam Altman wasn't um, winding up the general public with his response. I mean, the question that was posed to him obviously was, I wonder how much OpenAI has lost in electricity costs from people saying please and thank you, and out of the blue, the CEO and founder Sam Altman replied saying tens of millions of dollars well spent. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, playing a little bit on that fear, right? Of the
Yeah.
as you said, the AI overlords. Although being having a glorified spreadsheet as an overlord would be an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm joking. There is a question around there. There's a question of can they adapt AI going forwards or such models going forwards to, in effect, edit a request as it goes in to remove unnecessary language almost as a
Yeah.
front end. So almost like have probably a smaller language model, but the front end that in effect rewrites it and optimizes the request before putting it through the full treatment.
Yeah. Is
Potentially,
that
that's
is
what.
that a bit like it's? I don't want to say policing, might be the wrong word, but it is a little bit of filtering, isn't it?
Well, it
To
is.
sort of
But
say,
then
yeah,
look, if we get into filtering, though, there's the entire one of the biggest issues you have with generative AI models, especially these public AI models, is they are all the victims of censorship to one degree or another.
yeah,
We've seen that in China. We've seen that when with the rival um, offerings that came through and the Tiananmen Square situation. We've seen it with Google where they tried to be more culturally appropriate and um, reimagined the founding fathers. We've seen it in a number of different ways, right? So, I think when it comes to censorship, for the defense to be we can't do that because of censorship, they're on pretty thin ice at that point.
yeah,
Um, I think to your wider question, though, in terms of requirements in general, and look, I'm not saying that we often find client requirements to say please and thank you very much, but if it is around stripping back to the bare bones of what you actually need. Um, Although having said that, again, with AI, one of the things that I personally have found AI incredibly useful for is when your brain isn't quite collecting your thoughts in the best way possible to just throw in what your brain
yeah,
is
yeah,
thinking, and it
yep,
helps to formulate that
yep,
and bring you back to where if you were performing at 100%, you might be there straight away.
yeah,
It can help with that process. So I think by nature, it's going to have a lot of jumbled
yeah. And I think it,
queries
it,
thrown
it
in.
comes to it's the prompt, isn't it? I think this is where AI is going to get sort of better over the next couple of years. Is how we how we develop the prompts. How can you sort of develop the prompts that are going to be quicker, more effective? They may take out the P's and Q's and that type of stuff. But I think it's that thing of that's where we're going to see sort of a real sort of traction where almost becomes that becomes the new skill, doesn't it? In terms of how do you write the right prompts that mean you get the
Of
best
course.
best output.
Yeah, of course, and it's going to take a long time to get there. I think the interesting point that was made though by one of the directors of the design team at Microsoft Copilot was saying that using polite language in the prompt sets a tone for the response as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, totally.
So
Yeah,
in terms of human interaction, we always prefer interactions that are well, depending on where you are in the world, I guess. But you prefer um, not to play to British stereotypes or anything, but we like a polite response. We expect a polite
yep,
response if we ask a
yeah,
polite question. So,
yeah.
um, so yeah,
And I
interesting
think
one.
it's still it is interesting this whole sort of power consumption dynamic as well. I think that's the thing that it needs it needs to be at the top of the agenda, which is if power consumption is going to sort of double by 2030 for DCs, what's the best way of dealing with that? Is the that whole sustainability angle. um, is going to be key.
Yep, and that then comes back down, and we won't go down the rabbit hole now fully in terms of the chips and everything, but that comes back to the most energy efficient chips and the most energy
Yeah, yeah,
efficient way of setting up the
yep,
DC itself. What was interesting this week was AWS have followed Microsoft's lead by stopping their search for new sites for new data centers. Now,
right,
AWS have come out. I think more through unofficial channels, but AWS have come out and said, there's no change to our plan. It's just a natural part of the contracting process. We're having a pause,
yep,
but it does feel like the uptake of AI has slowed, and therefore, as your Microsoft putting in place provision to expand and to bring online new sites, AWS doing the same thing, and both have now started to slow down. So that doesn't negate the need for these chips and for these more energy efficient processes, but maybe the boom has been slightly overstated. Okay, so final story for today is reflection back now on the Q4 results for a number of the IT services giants. So previously we spoke about the upcoming Infosys and HCL results. They've obviously now been released alongside the likes of Wipro, Capgemini, and others in terms of the latest quarter results. And what does it tell us?
yeah.
Um,
What's the trend? I think that's the thing we're
the,
looking
the
for, isn't
the
it?
the trend is pretty much exactly as expected, to be perfectly honest. There is moderate growth in certain areas. Some organizations have had more successes than others with larger deals or mid-sized deals, new logos. I made the point last time, that TCS had only seen an increase of two overall or total deal sizes worth over $100 million
Yeah,
per year. Um, in the last 12 months, that is. So we know there's a lack of major deals coming through in the pipeline. We know the operating costs for these organizations are starting to increase. A couple of interesting points that came out, though, were an acceptance that at the moment the impact of tariffs isn't being felt, but that they do expect it to moving forwards. So this may well be the last quarter, or they may sneak in Q1 of next year. But this may be the last quarter we see without the impact of tariffs and the economic uncertainty that that's brought with it.
yep,
Um, but again, to reiterate the point from last time around, this is still a buyer's market. We're in a position at the moment where there's a heavy reliance from these organizations to maintain their existing portfolio of clients because there's such a lack of net new opportunities out there,
yep.
especially net new opportunities at scale.
Uh,
Now,
a question for me to you is, what are you seeing in terms of that captive market as well? Are we seeing businesses sort of go further down that route, or is that having an impact on this? Because is that
yeah.
something that we're seeing more and more of?
So, and when you say captive, just for all audiences, there we're referring to like versions of the build, operate, transfer models. The
Yeah,
selling
in-house
yeah,
sort of solutions, but in cheaper locations.
yeah. Um, and yes, we are seeing more organizations attempt it. Um, we're seeing, especially in the likes of Latin America and India, so the kind of the usual locations,
Yep.
we are seeing an attempt to do more in this space. However, those models are, as we know from many years of experience in them, are fraught with danger. And
Well, they're less flexible, aren't they? I think that's the thing is that
well,
they don't give you that sort of holy grail from a outsource services provider, whether it's onshore, nearshore, offshore, whatever it might be. It's supposed to give you flexibility, isn't it?
it
Um,
is. It is, but on top of the flexibility as well, it's supposed to bring you market leading knowledge from
yeah,
individuals who are constantly working on
yeah,
new and novel projects for the world's leading organizations. So, so yes, you are supposed to have flexibility to ramp up and ramp down and not have the overhead costs associated with full time employment. Um, and you're supposed to get the best of breed in terms of thought leadership and
Yep.
experience and knowledge. But also those organizations, because of the models, because of the associated profits with such organizations, they're able to pay individuals more than in-house organizations normally can. If we take an example here of probably the largest success story from the UK in this space from many, many years ago with Tesco. So Tesco went to India, and with the help of, I won't say who, but I'm sure many people will know, with one of the large Indian outsource providers, set up an organization in India, badged as Tesco's, to all intents
Yep.
and purposes Tesco's. The staff transferred over, Tesco employees, to run a lot of the app development work and that maintenance work for the organization. But Tesco still use third-party organizations in that space as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this isn't a solution. I think for organizations who do this and try and look at it as we are going to stop using IT third-party providers, and we are going to just have this captive model in place. We're
Yeah.
going to
It's
do
that
a build, operate,
augmentation, isn't
transfer.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
that. It,
Yeah.
it it works for certain. It works in certain areas. This is more about to the article I raised last week that I'll link in the description of this episode again today. There was an article from Bain around some of the key areas you need to consider before you consider this major outsourcing work.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same consideration if you're going to look at that captive model. And you need to be very clear on what you are, but also what you aren't looking to outsource, or in
Yeah.
this case, what you are looking this team to actually deliver. Because you don't necessarily want a team that's going to be fantastic at S4 HANA implementation, because you're only going to need them for the next
Yeah.
3 to
It's only
5
short.
years.
It's relatively short term, isn't it? Yeah.
Right,
Well,
exactly. So
I'm not
it's
sure
identifying the right
S4 HANA and
opportunity.
short term have ever gone in the same sentence, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Or low cost.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
because one the other question I had is that, from a this is probably a hard one to answer, but from an individual's perspective, are they sort of seeing that? Because I would imagine if you're a developer or you're in that industry, you want to work for one of those companies. You want to work for those type of companies who've got multiple clients, multiple opportunities, potential travel, all of those sort of things, and growth, rather than working for, no disrespect to Tesco, but rather than working for a company. Is that
yeah,
something you see as a hindrance as well?
100%.
Yeah.
Look, if you look, let's look at India here as the largest player in this space in terms of the number of companies whose largest base is there. Pretty much every major player in the market has their largest base in India, and company names like Tata, like Tech Mahindra, like HCL, Cognizant, Infosys. They're not just household names; they're names that there's a lot of national pride within those organisations,
Yeah.
and therefore to work for those organisations
A lot of
is a
kudos.
badge of
Yeah.
honour.
Yeah.
And because a lot of it, if you look at when the recent passing um, of one of the Tata dynasty, and you see the outpouring of emotion in India in that moment because the philanthropy and the other work that's done by these organisations. Um, it's not like it's not like Tesco's in the UK where, in the nice way possible, I enjoy shopping at Tesco's as much as the next person, but I'm not gonna be overly emotional about the financial performance. I'm not sat there. I don't feel national pride in an organisation like you. You could argue M&S. You could argue John Lewis. There are certain organisations that make you proud to be British. I get that,
Yeah.
but it's a different level. It's a completely different ball game there,
Yeah.
and especially if you're not a very well known name, if you're going over and looking to set up, you either have to pay significantly over the odds or take a massive gamble on lesser qualified individuals to work for your
Yeah.
organization. So a lot of the time what you'll see is there's a conjunction. So it'll be HCL with or
Yeah.
TCS with, emphasis
Yeah. Yeah.
with, which is great for the first period of time. But then 3 years down the line, or whatever the time period you agree, some 6 months, some 12 months, some 3 years, when the transfer happens of employment, at that point, then that pride kind of drops away. And then you got the problem then of you've got an organization 3 blocks away who will come in and say, right, we'll pay you 30% more.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's going to take somebody incredibly strong to be able to turn down an uplift for 30% to do the exact same job, a couple of doors down the street.
Yep.
So,
So it's definitely something to be mindful of, isn't it, for that sort of captive environment, that you've got to be on top of it. You've got to be really on top of how you operate it, who you operate it with, all of that type of thing. Yeah.
definitely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And look, when these things go wrong, they cost a lot of money. You have to invest in the site. You got to invest in the setup. This is it's not a cheap option. It's one that should be taken very much eyes open and not rushed into. That concludes this episode of Bite Size Buyers. As always, if you've made it this far, then thank you very much for listening. We'll be back at the same time next week. If you've got a news story that you'd like to hear us cover, then please do leave a comment down below. Finally, if you've enjoyed this episode or a previous episode, please remember to support us by giving us a thumbs up and subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. I've been Sam Harris.
And I've been Nick Wagstaff.
Until next time.